Hi there, welcome to the section all about colors and patterns. There's going to be a bunch of videos to do with this. This first video here is about advanced color tips and tricks before we get started. All right, let's jump in. First thing to do is open up colormodes.ai. It's in your exercise files. And first thing we're going to do is just recap. If I go to File New, just be careful when you do click on something like print and go, I'm going to make a US letter, and you'll see by default under advanced options down here, it really wants to be CMYK, which is the kind of, for commercial printing, that's what they want. But what I find is everything that I'm doing has multiple purposes. So I'll do an RGB first and then convert to CMYK when it's that particular thing is getting ready for print. Okay, because RGB has a bigger color field or more colors to use. So just note that while you're making it. Let's have a little look at what happens if you, let's hit close on that. See this thing here, this one's set up as RGB. I can see in the top here. Okay, if I go and convert this using File, Document Color Mode, and I say I want you to be actually CMYK, watch the color differences. Can you see how much this washed out? I kind of purposely pick colors that I knew would kind of do badly, but there's, so if you're designing this way and these colors, you're kind of making decisions on colors that, you don't have as many options. So work in RGB before going to CMYK. The other thing to note is that you can't round trip, which means that you can't start in CMYK, start in RGB, convert it to CMYK, and then go, actually, I want to go back to RGB. Watch, the colors just don't come back. It's kind of a one-way street. So they came back a little bit, but not as much. I'm going to hit undo a couple of times to get back to the full version. So editing amazingness, we'll have to get the editor to kind of flash between the two. Okay, so editor, can you flash between this one and this one? Do it a couple of times. There you go. So you can't just kind of like go RGB and then come back to CMYK and then flick back across. So start in RGB, go one-way street. Okay, eventually if something's going to print, convert it to CMYK. Okay, boring. Exciting things to do with color and getting your tricks up is, let's say I grab this guy and I want to change his color, and it always picks the swatches up here. Okay, you can hold down Shift and it weirdly converts it to RGB, okay, or whatever colors you want to work with. Okay, so just holding down Shift. I click on this guy, okay, drop him down, it gives me my swatches, but if I hold down Shift before I click it, it gives me the kind of RGB spectrum, which is cool. Holding down Shift. Another handy one is if I select on the circle and I want to steal a color from here, I can use the eyedropper tool, but by default, it really doesn't want to. Okay, so if you hold down the Shift key, like we did before, and click on a color, it will go and steal it. So if I have this selected, grab my eyedropper tool, click on Shift, and why isn't it working? Because I've got my stroke at the front, Dan. Come on, bring the fill to the front. Remember the shortcut, X. Okay, and hold down Shift, and it will bring the colors through. Okay, so I've stolen some colors from there. Now, while you're working is you can see my color panel has opened. Okay, if yours is not, go to Window and open up color. Now, it'll default to CMYK, obviously, if you're using that, but it defaults to RGB. And RGB is a hard spectrum to work with, right? Because you're like, okay, I want to make purple. You're like, a bit more red, is it? I don't know. You're like, it's hard to know what to do. You can use this down the bottom here. And what I find the hardest is like, I want to make this a bit darker. Bit darker. I slide these all along, or I slide them all down. The better color space, the nicer color space to work with is called HSB. Okay, it's no different than RGB, it's just a different way of looking at it. So you're not kind of changing it. These two are very different ways of working. Hue, saturation, brightness is just a different way of looking at RGB. And yeah, that's what it stands for, hue, saturation, and brightness. I love it because you click on this, you just want to make it a bit darker or a bit lighter. Okay, so you're not kind of having to, guess what RGB is. Same with the hue, kind of a hue slider along here, and obviously saturation is saturation. Okay, so I often will use HSB rather than RGB when I'm picking colors. Next thing we'll cover is kind of pre-made swatches. So my swatches panel window, I'm going to go to swatches. Where are you? There it is. Okay, now you can't change the defaults like you can in something like InDesign. Okay, you can't change them forever, which is a pain. Okay, but you can import swatches. Let's say you're working at a company and you just want to have, like, on the network drive, you want to have colors that everybody uses. Maybe it's the client colors or, yeah. So importing swatches is a couple of ways. The official way is the ASE folder. Okay, so you can go to swatches menu, go to this little hamburger menu in the top right and go, I want to open swatches and I want to bring in another library. Okay, and what people tend to do is they use the ASE file. It's the Adobe Swatch Exchange. And that's one that should use, right? You're like, yeah, that's the one, that sounds good. Problem with that one is it doesn't allow gradients in it, which is sucky. So I never use that one. So all you do is, there's no kind of like, you don't say you've got a document with all the colors in it and it's an Illustrator file. You don't have to export a special file. All you do is just save that AI file. Call it something like swatches, like I've done in a sec, and just import them. So if I go to open swatch library and I'm gonna bring in other library, okay, that's gonna allow me to find one on my network drive. For you guys, I've got one in your exercise files and I called it Gradient Gradients thing. There are gradients from Gradient. Okay, and it's just an Illustrator file. Okay, not an ASC file. And the cool thing about it is that it's just a regular old document. Click open, and it opens up this panel here, and it's got those are all the swatches that we used in this document. These are the ones that I wanted. Okay, and what you need to do is they're kind of separate, right? And you're like, oh man, they're separate. So what you can do is just select them all, drag them in, and now you've got them as part of this document. Not the smoothest operation, I know. I wish we could just update the swatches by default. If you ever find a way of doing that, you let me know. Okay, drop me an email or leave a comment on this page. Okay, so that's a way of doing it. Another way is just to use the libraries. So if your CC libraries, we'll do a full video on that later on, looking at the advanced things, but I've got a library called My Library. Say I'm in Photoshop, okay, and Photoshop here, I want to use my eyedropper tool, and I'm going to steal this kind of yellow color. See it is there in my foreground color, okay. Over here, I can say plus, and so I want to add that foreground color. And there he is there. And the cool thing about it is in any Adobe program now, there's that color ready to be used. Okay, it's probably the easiest way to get things around. And you can set your library. So I've got libraries for lots of businesses that I do work for. So let's look at Instructor HQ. And there's the colors. So it kind of gets around this not being able to do global swatches. They're just in here, always ready to go. And this thing here is interchangeable with After Effects, InDesign, Premiere, whatever you're using. That's probably the easier way to share colors. A second ago, I mentioned gradient, okay, and I kind of ignored it. These colors here, these gradients, I am so back into love with gradients. I hated them. Not hated, hate's a strong word, but you know, we all went through our phase of like, it's all about flat colors, flat design. Now it's kind of like, oh man, some gradients. And there's a really cool site. I'll jump to it now. All right, so this is Gradient, okay, Grab Gradients, love the name. And it's just nice looking gradients. You can look at them and go, there's a couple of pages of them. And if you find one you like, okay, it's got all the CSS and stuff for it, but for Illustrator, you're probably best to just click on the first color swatch, grab this hexadecimal number, copy it, and then in Illustrator, okay, let's say that I've got this guy here, okay, and I wanna bring this color in, okay, I'm gonna add a gradient. Remember our shortcut? Remember what the shortcut is? Period, okay, and it's added a gradient. Let's grab my gradient panel here, double click this guy, and there's the hexadecimal number that goes in. Okay, so there's that first color, I'm gonna drag him off, and the second color here. There we go, cool. All right, next thing we'll look at is kind of global colors versus Pantone. Let's look at global colors first. Let's close down a lot of these windows. So I've got my swatches panel open. What is our global color? Basically, to look at them, it's this guy here. See this thing that has the little white cross, little white kind of cutout at the bottom of it? That is called a global color. The difference between the rest of them is that it kind of updates. Let's do a for instance. So I'm gonna do a circle here. Actually, I'll do this circle. I'm gonna grab my eyedropper tool, and I'm going to hold down my shift key, okay, and I'm going to pull this blue. Okay, actually I want to get rid of the gradient. Remember your shortcuts, okay, remember comma is the for a full color, get rid of the gradient. So hold down shift, I'm going to grab that yellow, and I'm going to say I want you to add to swatches, this little new swatch button. By default, okay, I'm going to do this option here that's going to be global, okay, I'm going to click OK. I'm going to do another one, okay, I'm going to grab the blue, add that as a swatch, but I'm not going to make it global. Cool. So I've got two colors that I made. You can kind of see them there. There's that first one and there's the second one. Global, not global. What ends up happening is I've got these two circles. I'm going to fill one with you. So I've got two colors, all right? Global, not global. If I have nothing selected and I go and change one of these, if I change the global one, I go in here and decide that actually I want it to be a different color, you'll notice that it reaches back into the document and adjusts all the colors, whereas this one doesn't. Okay, if I double click this guy and say, actually, I want this to be, remember, HSB better, so I want to darken it up. Okay, I've darkened it up, the swatch, but it's the, where it's being used has not updated. Okay, so that just something you need to know about. By default now in the new version of Illustrator, by default, it really wants to make them global. And I find that's probably a nicer way of working. The other color option you might find is a Pantone color, and they look slightly different, okay? And they're very hard to find, okay? You go into swatches, you gotta really want to find a Pantone color. If you've not used Pantone, they're just pre-mixed colors, okay? That often bigger brands use to make sure they get color accuracy across lots of things. So it's under Open Swatch Library. So into the burger menu, right? And Open Swatch Library, color books, and here they are here, okay? Probably the most common are Pantone Solid. Okay, either coated or uncoated, whether the paper you're using shiny or a matte finish. Okay, there are, if you're using Color Bridge, obviously use these ones. There's called neons and metallic colors, but they're the oldest, but still they're probably the most commonly used. And this thing opens, okay, and you've got your Pantone colors. Say we're using 032 red, okay, and I'm just going to add that to my swatches library so that when I'm designing, I'm using that specific color. It's pre-mixed. Pantone guarantees it's going to be that color red forever, okay, and you'll only use these Pantone colors when you are doing physical printing, okay. You can use Pantone colors for going out digital, but there's no guarantee of color, okay. It's only when it goes out to like offset commercial printing, not printer in the LaserJet, just commercial printing. All right, I'm going to close that down. You'll also notice is that it's a slight different kind of variation of it's got that kind of global white slash, but it's got a dot in it as well. That kind of like instantly I can see which are the Pantone colors. All right, 2 more handy tips is, let's say I'm gonna make 2 more circles. Okay, and I'm just gonna randomly mix colors. I'm gonna brighten it up a little bit, and I'm gonna pick that color, and I'm gonna, that color, and let's pick something in here. Something really obvious, lighten it up. There we go. Ugly colors there. But you can tell they're not swatches yet, right? Okay, because they haven't been added. Okay, so if you want to kind of say, actually, I just want to have this document, grab all the colors, stick it in the swatches panel so that I can use it maybe to import to another document. Okay, so what you can do is you can just go to the swatches panel, I've got nothing selected, and say, can you please add all the colors that are used in this document to the swatches panel? And notice a big chunk of new swatches get added, okay? And in this case, it's added not just those 2 colors there, okay? You can kind of see when I click on them, see it, they're highlighted there because they're global colors. And it's also added the colors that I used in this gradient, which is really handy, okay? You can see that was the gradient that was already there, but the colors that make it up are now added. Another useful tip is you can go into that same option and say, actually, just get rid of, select all the unused, okay? And you can see these haven't been used, and I can delete it. Yes, get rid of them all. Okay, so say you are working and you want to create like a company-wide Illustrator file that people can pull colors from, is you probably don't want all the junky RGB colors. You just want the ones specific to your brand. Mine are looking a little messy, but you get the idea, right? Another cool little trick is, say you've got purple and you've used it like 100 times. I'm just Command D'ing. Okay, it's all over the place. You don't have to go and find it all. What you can do to switch out this one is a little trick. Say this guy here I want to switch out for an obvious color, that pink. All you do is click, hold, and drag it, but you got to hold down the Option key. Okay, and you can cut. It's a little bit hard, but if I put it right over the top of it, it goes and swatches that one out for that one. I have 2 of the same now, which is not great, but it's that's the way to kind of go. I want you to replace with you completely. I find that handy if I've got, say, a Pantone color, okay, and I want, get rid of you, buddy, just drag the kind of corresponding CMYK color on top of them, and it will replace it. Holding down the Option key on a Mac, and it's the Alt key on a PC. All right, last bit of this advanced color nerdery is that you can now, in the new version of Illustrator, you couldn't do this before, is you can put gradients on strokes, and there's a few things you can do. First of all, at the moment, if I add a color to it, or gradient to it, it's doing it to the fill, so I'm gonna undo. Remember our shortcut, because at the moment, remember, we want to bring the fills at the front, strokes at the back. Do you remember what it was? The X key. X key, watch the little swatches down here. Just brings the stroke to the front. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to pick on you. Okay, say I've decided, I've decided I like that color the most. So by default, it goes on a stroke, which is really cool. But there's a couple of options. So under Properties, click on Stroke. Okay. Actually not in there at all. It's under Window and it's under Gradient. So in here, what you're looking for is these options. So at the moment, it's just kind of filling it left to right. Okay, so if I click on this guy and I say, actually, I want to do the same thing, I'm going to fill him up. It goes left to right. It's a bit more obvious in the spiral. If I select on it and I click on this second option, it's going to apply along the stroke, so it kind of flows along. Remember earlier in this course, I said we did keyboard shortcuts a little while ago, and we're like, remember Command H? That gets rid of all the lines. Remember Command H on? Because it's hard to see the gradient. Command H turns all the anchor points off, just a little easier to use. If you move to your direct selection tool as well, it's still selected, so I can mess around with it, but I can see it a little easier. And that brings up that last option. Across the gradient can be handy. Okay, so it's going kind of left to right rather than along it, or just going completely across it. All right, so that's going to be it for color goodness. I'm going to hit Command H just to turn this back on. In case we get lost later on. But yeah, that's it. Let's look at more color stuff in this colors and patterns section. All right, let's go to the next video.